The spray of cleaning solution lingered in the air, mercilessly cold, sticking to my throat even as I scrubbed the linoleum floor of aisle 15. A sour chemical tang sneaked into my nostrils with each breath. Then, quiet, soft, insistent, a voice behind the shelves. Mason! My heart leapt, fingers freezing on the rag. The gardening section was locked, dark beyond the single overhead bulb. I spun, scent of bleach now acrid, electrified, and there was nothing but the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Hi, my name is Mason. I've been a night janitor at a Walmart in Kentucky for the past 8 months. I'm the one sweeping up after the world sleeps. Every night I begin here. I wipe the floor, line the carts, shut off the registers one by one as the echoes of last-minute shoppers vanish. But tonight, the voice was different. I stood in silence beneath the flickering glow, palms damp, feeling the grit of dust under my fingertips. My uniform felt too warm, the fluorescent lamp too bright, too unforgiving. The voice rang again. Mason. No warmth, no pity, just a whisper, intimate and uneasy. I dropped the rag and followed the voice, each step soft against the cold tile. The light stuttered as I passed through aisle 16. The air felt thick, like a static charge. I reached the edge of aisle 17, where the garden chemicals stood tall in rows of plastic bottles and fertilizer bags. My breath hitched. The intercom had been silent for hours, or at least it should have been. I never used it after midnight unless there was an emergency. Yet the name felt pressed into my mind, carved deep. My hand brushed a can of weed killer. It rattled slightly, not because I moved it, but because someone, was breathing close. I turned, heart hammering, and met only the endless shelves. The cold air rattled in my lungs, and the faint scent of damp earth, unexpected here among ounces of synthetic compounds, snuck in. I raised my hand to the sleeve of my uniform, its polyester scratchy under my fingers. Routine is my armor, mop after mop, corner after corner, voices of the past, radio snippets, registers beeping, nothing irregular. But this was different. I shivered, hearing the faint scrape of cartwheels against polished floors, motion without a visible source. I steadied myself, whispering to the emptiness, "Who's there?" No response came, just the distant echo of HVAC vents and the distant hum of life outside the locked doors. I clenched the rag and tried to force logic into the tight knot in my chest. It was a store like any other. Empty aisles, neat rows, fluorescent hum. Yet I felt eyes on me, unseen but very present. I remembered that last night, a box of seasonal holiday candles had appeared in the storage area. I wasn't assigned that shift, but recognized the box wasn't in the inventory log. I'd moved it aside. Now I wondered where that box was, or if it had moved on its own. My hand shook on the mop handle, something sticky from earlier, warmth where cool should have been. I looked at the shelves, the dull glow revealing plastic plant trays, gardening tools, packets of seeds, silent and still. A cold breeze, too cold, swept past, carrying the smell of wet soil, heavier this time. A whisper echoed again, more deliberate and unmistakably close. Mason. Not a memory or a name, but a summons. Personal. Too personal. I backed away, breath catching. The store felt unstable, as though a heartbeat thrummed through these aisles. Every discarded receipt, every product label became a silent witness. I shuffled back, dragging the mop, and the lights flickered again. Darkness stretched between flickers, shadows pooling beyond the cans of mulch. I didn't stop walking until I hit the next aisle, the scent of plastic polish and leftover lunch drifting in. I leaned against a shelving unit, sweaty and cold all at once. The voice had paused, but I knew it wasn't gone. Something watched. Knew my name. The warehouse clock ticked, just past 1:07 a.m. I had hours before shift end, yet I felt locked in, tethered to that voice. My name, repeated in empty space, became a promise and a warning. And I realized, if someone or something is calling your name in the store after midnight, don't answer. The air vents groaned to life around 1:30 a.m., like they always do, a low mechanical exhale echoing from the ceiling grates. Only this time, they didn't sound empty. This time, there was a shape to the noise, a rhythm. It wasn't until I slowed my mop strokes and tilted my head upward that I realized what I was hearing. My name. Not spoken, but formed, carried in the pressurized stutters and pulsing sighs of the ventilation system. Ma. Son. I stood frozen in front of the refrigerated section, watching the rows of milk jugs and boxed juices tremble slightly behind their fogged glass. A single drop of condensation ran down one of the doors, tracing a vertical line like a tear. My ears strained, and again the sound came. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. The vents were speaking. I'm not the kind of person to believe in ghosts. I believe in late hours, sore backs, and paychecks that don't match the effort. But when the mechanical system that's supposed to move air and dust starts articulating syllables, your syllables, you begin to question your grip on what's solid. I grabbed the radio clipped to my belt, static whispering back as I pressed the talk button. Kyle, you copy? No answer. Kyle's the only other person who works my shift. He covers restocking from midnight to 4, usually listens to music with one earbud in, always says he doesn't spook easy. I envied that about him. But the silence on the radio made me feel very, very alone. I moved toward the cleaning closet in the back hallway. My footsteps echoed sharply, louder than normal, and my skin itched with the feeling of being watched. That sensation, like you're just barely missing something when you turn your head. I passed under one of the ceiling grates. The smell hit me then. It wasn't just metal and dust. It was something else. Wet wood. Like old paneling left out in the rain, with a faint note of rust and something sweet. Almost like dried blood. It flooded my nostrils and sent a chill down my spine. I stepped directly beneath one of the larger vents and listened. Nothing at first, just the usual thrum. Then, just as I was about to walk away, a rasping hiss coiled down the ductwork. Mason, I know. What you did. My knees nearly gave out. It wasn't just my name this time. It spoke a sentence. The voice was low, genderless, and somehow both distant and right beside my ear. I stumbled back into a shelf of mops, knocking over a bottle of glass cleaner. It shattered at my feet, spraying my boots with cold, vinegar-scented liquid. I didn't move right away. The smell clung to me, sharp and sterile, but I barely noticed. My eyes were on the vent. That voice wasn't guessing. It knew me. A memory tried to surface, something I'd buried. Something from before I moved to Kentucky, but it slipped away like a fish in murky water. All I had was the pounding of my heart and the voice's final sentence playing on repeat in my head. I forced myself to move, gripping the mop handle like it could ward off whatever was trying to crawl through the ductwork. I headed toward the break room, hoping to find Kyle or at least some sign of normalcy. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Every corner looked unfamiliar, like the building had subtly shifted overnight, and the vents followed me. Every few feet, a new grate, a new breath, and sometimes a whisper. Not always words, sometimes just a sound like chewing or laughing, but low, restrained, as if holding back until the right moment. By the time I reached the break room, the vending machine's glow was the only light I trusted. I leaned against the wall, catching my breath. I stared at the ceiling tiles, too afraid to close my eyes. There, above the microwave, was another vent, smaller, almost decorative. I squinted and saw something. A reflection? A pair of faint, unfocused eyes watching through the slats? No, that wasn't possible. But neither was any of this. I didn't speak, didn't call for help. Just stood still as the hum of the machine buzzed around me, and the air vent continued to breathe in a slow, hungry rhythm. In that moment, I realized something simple and terrifying. The store was not empty, and whatever else was inside knew who I was. I clung to my routine like a lifeline. After that night, after the vents whispered my name, I tried to pretend nothing had changed. That's the thing about working night shift. You're surrounded by silence and repetition. And when something breaks that rhythm, you either accept the fracture or you tape over it and keep going. I chose the tape. The following night, I arrived at 10:58 p.m. sharp, clocked in, grabbed my cart of cleaning supplies, nodded to Kyle, who barely looked up from his phone. He had a habit of sitting with one foot on the stockroom table, watching videos until the store emptied out. It used to bother me. Now I found comfort in his indifference. The building was quiet, like always. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels dense, like the store is listening, waiting. I began my loop. Mop the front entrance, polish the freezer handles, disinfect the self-checkout. Routine. Safe. I told myself the voice was just a product of sleep deprivation, a trick of echoes. I hadn't heard it since, but something else had taken its place. Shadows. Not the kind cast by shelves or mannequins. These ones moved wrong. I first noticed them near aisle 3, cleaning products. There was a flash just at the corner of my eye. I turned, expecting to see my own silhouette reflected in the waxed floor. Instead, I saw nothing. No shape, no source. Just motion. It happened again in aisle 6. I was restocking the air fresheners when a can rolled off the shelf and stopped inches from my foot. I picked it up, heart tight in my chest. The shelf above was full, no missing spot, no tilt. I scanned the ceiling. The lights hummed as usual, but one of them flickered for a second, sending a tremor through the air. I reached up to adjust my cap, and when I did, I noticed my reflection in the metal base of the shelf. Except, I wasn't moving. I blinked. The reflection was. A subtle shift of the head, just slightly out of sync with me. I backed away. Routine. I needed routine. I forced myself to move on. I wiped down the carts, sanitized the bathrooms, took the trash to the compactor, everything by the book. And yet, behind each task, the sense of being watched returned. Not by security cameras or a manager, but by the store itself. Like the shelves leaned in when I passed. Like the floor tiles remembered where I stepped. At one point, I found myself standing in front of the seasonal display, back to school supplies this month, just staring. I must have zoned out because when I blinked, 15 minutes had passed. My mop bucket was dry, and someone had written something in the dust behind the pencil boxes. 4 letters, uneven and smeared. M-A-S-O, the N was missing. Or maybe unfinished. I didn't touch it. I just turned and walked away. I passed by Kyle once, restocking cans near the frozen section. I opened my mouth to speak, maybe tell him what I'd seen, but he looked through me. Not past me, through, as if my presence hadn't registered. His eyes were dull, unfocused. He picked up a can, placed it on the shelf, picked up the same can again. Repetition. "Hey," I said, but he didn't respond. He just kept working, methodically, like someone playing a loop. I left him there. In the break room, I checked the security monitor. The live feed showed the toy aisle. It was empty, except for a single distant shadow cast across the floor. No source, no body. The screen blinked once, then again. I turned it off. That night when I clocked out, I didn't look back at the store. I walked to my car without glancing at the windows, even though I felt something behind the glass. Watching, waiting. That was the last night I truly believed I could keep pretending this was normal. I found the box near the back wall of the receiving area, tucked behind a stack of outdated Halloween decor we hadn't sold through last year. It wasn't labeled like the others. No barcode, no department sticker, just a plain, nondescript cardboard box, sealed with packing tape that looked too clean, like it hadn't come through any warehouse. It wasn't supposed to be there. Every package that enters our store goes through an intake process. I should know. I handle a lot of the late-night inventory when Kyle's too stoned to focus, but this box wasn't on the manifest. I double-checked the logbook, scanned the sheet, even pulled up the system entries from the past 3 days. Nothing. And yet there it sat, squat and silent, as if it had always been there. I approached it slowly. The receiving bay was colder than usual, the air stale with the faint scent of cardboard, plastic, and something older, like an attic sealed too long. My boots echoed softly on the concrete floor. I nudged the box with my foot. It didn't budge, heavier than it looked. I crouched and peeled the tape back, the adhesive making a soft tearing noise that sounded much too loud in the silence. The box flaps lifted with resistance, as if they hadn't been opened in decades. Inside was a single object, wrapped in yellowed newspaper and resting atop crumpled packing straw. I reached in, hands trembling, and removed it. A mirror. Old. Heavy. Oval-shaped, with a tarnished bronze frame etched in swirling patterns. The glass was fogged and slightly warped, not cracked, but aged in a way that made your reflection look off, like it lagged a half-second behind, or was showing a version of yourself you didn't remember becoming. I held it at arm's length and turned it slowly. My face stared back, eyes darker than they should be, mouth slack. The lighting in the room flickered slightly, but the reflection didn't. That's when I noticed the corner of the mirror, a fingerprint, pressed in from the inside of the glass. I dropped it, not out of fear, but instinct. The frame hit the concrete with a muffled thud, but the glass didn't shatter. It simply landed, face up, my reflection staring back, mouth now slightly open. I wasn't open-mouthed. I wasn't moving. I kicked the box shut and shoved it back where I'd found it, heart pounding in my ears. I left the receiving area and went straight to the electronics section. Pulled up the inventory tablet and scanned the database again, item by item. Still no mention of a mirror. No generic listings, no unsorted boxes, nothing even close. When I returned later to double-check, the box was gone. The Halloween crates were still there. Everything else was untouched, but the blank box had vanished. I didn't tell Kyle. Didn't tell the manager during the next shift handoff. What could I even say? Hey, a mirror that reflects wrong and has fingerprints on the inside appeared from nowhere, and now it's missing? No one believes you when you're on graveyard. That night, in the break room, I sat with the lights off and stared at the vending machines, watching their dull neon reflections shift across the floor tiles. I was hoping maybe the silence would settle something inside me. Then the intercom popped. Not fully on, not static, just a click, like someone pressing the mic for a split second. I waited. 5 minutes passed, then another click, followed by a low, raspy exhale. Not a word, just a breath, a human breath. I stood slowly and looked toward the hallway. All the lights were on, except the one in the receiving area. It was dark now, and I swear I saw something shift behind the door window, a faint silhouette, tall and still. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The intercom clicked again. A single word whispered like a memory. Mason. I didn't sleep the next morning. I sat in my apartment staring at the wall across from my bed, still wearing my work uniform, shoes unlaced, fingers digging into the thin foam of my couch cushion. The echo of the intercom, Mason, kept looping in my head like a damaged cassette. Not scared, exactly. Not anymore. Just hollowed out, as if part of me had stayed behind in the store. A shadow burned into tile. Later that afternoon, just before my next shift, I went back early. Told the manager I was reviewing floor safety footage. He didn't care. He rarely looks me in the eye. I made my way to the security room. Tiny, dim, always 5 degrees too warm. The cameras ran a 48-hour cycle. I queued up the footage from the night before, from midnight to 2 a.m. Watching myself on screen was always surreal, like seeing a version of me I didn't recognize. But this time, something was off immediately. At 1:12 a.m., I watched myself, on camera, walk into aisle 7. Only, I hadn't. I was in the break room at that time. I remember because I was trying to shake the image of the mirror. I even checked the clock on the microwave. 1:12 exactly. I'd stared at it, unmoving, for nearly 3 minutes. But there I was, on the monitor, walking slow and stiff through aisle 7. I leaned closer. The figure moved like me, dressed like me, head slightly tilted like mine does when I'm thinking. But the way he walked, it wasn't tired. It was purposeful, controlled. He stopped midway down the aisle, turned toward the shelves, and just stood there. For almost 7 full minutes. No movement, no gestures, just stillness. Then, without warning, his head snapped toward the camera, toward me, like he knew I was watching, like he was waiting for this moment. I paused the footage. His eyes were open too wide. His smile was not mine. It pulled too far. The skin around his mouth stretched tight like it had been forced into that shape. There was something behind the teeth, dark, wet, unnatural. I rewound, played it again. Same thing. I checked the break room cam just to be sure. At 1:12 a.m., there I was, sitting alone, motionless, staring at the microwave. But that meant 2 of me at the same time. The air in the security room turned thick, humid. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. Tried to rationalize. Maybe it was old footage spliced in, some glitch in the system, but no one else had access to the security logs, not even Kyle. And besides, the me on the screen had moved differently, like it knew what it was doing, like it wasn't mimicking me, it was becoming me. I scanned forward in the footage. At 1:19 a.m., the figure left the aisle and disappeared into the warehouse area. At 1:21, I stood up from the break room chair and walked out, exactly as I remembered. I checked the warehouse cam next. There was a 3-minute stretch, 1:23 to 1:26, where the feed cut to static. When it resumed, the camera angle had shifted slightly, like someone had tilted it by hand. The only thing visible in the frame was the door to the receiving bay, slowly swinging shut. I didn't watch anymore. I closed the feed and wiped my login from the system, left the room without speaking, past the manager's office. He didn't look up. That night, I kept my head down. I mopped the floors, one eye on the mirrors. I avoided the cameras. I avoided the break room. Every time I passed a reflective surface, I tried not to stare. But it's hard. You always want to be sure the person looking back is you. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I passed Kyle stocking toilet paper. He turned to me and said something casual. "Hey, man." But I froze, because he didn't call me Mason. He called me Miles. That's my brother's name. Kyle couldn't have known that. I never talk about Miles. Not at work. Not to anyone. I didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. But as I did, I caught my reflection in the black glass of the shut-down TV display. And for a split second, I swear, it smiled first. Aisle 9 always felt longer than the others. I noticed it on my first week working here. Something about its dimensions never seemed to match the others. I could walk aisle 8 in 15 steps, and aisle 10 in roughly the same. But aisle 9? I stopped counting after 30. Not because it was that long, but because it kept changing. Some nights I'd reach the end and feel like I hadn't moved at all. Others, I'd turn the corner and be facing the entrance again, heart hammering, certain I had just looped. But it wasn't until last week that I realized something was truly wrong with that aisle. It started with a sound. I had dropped my keys, clatter, sharp, metal, on the polished tile near the beginning of aisle 9. The noise echoed down the corridor like it should. But when I bent to pick them up and stood again, I heard it again. The exact same clatter. Only nothing had moved. No one had dropped anything. There was no camera lag, no sound delay. It wasn't a reverberation, it was a repetition. A copy. I took a cautious step forward. My boots made the usual soft squeak. But in aisle 9, there was no echo, no feedback, no sound bouncing off the walls. It was like the space was swallowing it whole. I paused, then stomped. Hard. Nothing. No echo. Just the faint, dull contact of rubber on tile, like walking in a padded room. I turned back toward the main walkway, and that's when I saw something at the far end. A shadow. Tall. Narrow. Still. It stood just past the final shelf, in the gap between this aisle and the next. No movement, no features, just a vertical strip of darker dark. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. No response. Not even ambient noise. I took a step forward, then another, heart thudding with each silent motion. The lights overhead flickered faintly, not enough to be noticed under normal circumstances, but now, they seemed to dim and throb with each step I took. As I passed the halfway point, I realized the signs hanging above the aisle had changed. Instead of canned goods and baking supplies, the signs simply read, "Stay. Still. Listen." They weren't real. I knew that. I'd stalked this aisle countless times. There's no reason for any of those signs to exist. I looked back. The entrance of the aisle seemed farther away now, blurred, like I was looking at it through a heat wave. I kept moving. Near the last third of the aisle, I stopped at a display of cooking oil bottles. Something about them looked wrong. I reached out to one of the labels. The brand name was familiar, but the expiration date read 08/14/1995, exactly 30 years ago, to the day. I dropped the bottle. It didn't break, but the oil inside shifted unnaturally, like there was something alive in the liquid, pressing against the plastic from the inside. The shadow hadn't moved. I turned toward it, and it was gone. No footsteps. no sound, just gone. Except now, something was behind me. Not close, not touching, but present, like a pressure on the back of my skull. I turned again. The aisle was empty. The space behind me stretched farther than it had when I entered. It was as if the aisle had grown, subtly, invisibly. I walked faster now, pushing through that sensation of being underwater. I passed shelves filled with unfamiliar brands, outdated packaging, cans without labels. Everything was slightly misaligned. Finally, I reached the end and turned the corner into aisle 10. The sound returned instantly, my footsteps echoing like normal, the lights steady, the signage correct. But when I glanced back into aisle 9, it was shorter again. Everything normal. Just 30 feet of tile and shelves, except the last bottle on the lowest rack, one of the cooking oils, was slowly turning. No wind, no vibrations, just turning, facing me. The expiration date was gone. In its place, printed in the label's design, were 3 words I didn't understand until later. You left first. He arrived during the dead hour. 2:46 a.m., no announcement, no call, no headlights in the parking lot. One moment, I was sweeping near the pharmacy. The next, I turned the corner, and he was there. Standing at the end of aisle 13, clipboard in hand, tie slightly askew, smiling. His name tag read Ronald, but I'd never seen him before. That wasn't unusual, technically. The company rotated overnight managers every few months, usually to audit stores or follow up on regional reports. But we hadn't been scheduled for an inspection. And no one, not Kyle, not even the day manager, had mentioned anyone new coming in. Still, I approached him like I was supposed to. Hey, didn't know we had someone in tonight. He smiled wider, too wide. The kind of smile that didn't fold the skin near the eyes. The kind that sat flat on the face like a sticker. Just doing a spot check, he said. His voice was smooth, quiet, polite in a manufactured way. I nodded and pretended to go back to work, but I watched him. He moved strangely. Not stiff, not robotic, just slightly out of sync. Like a man wearing his own skin wrong. His shoes made no sound against the tile. His clipboard didn't have any papers clipped to it, just a blank sheet. And he kept writing on it anyway, scratching at the surface with a dead pen. I passed by the toy section 20 minutes later. He was standing there, still, watching a shelf full of plush animals. I didn't say anything this time, but when I turned to walk away, I saw something that made me stop cold. In the convex mirror above the aisle, the ones installed for loss prevention, I could see his reflection, perfectly centered, but his head was facing me. Not the toys. Me. Even though his actual body hadn't moved. I turned fast. In real time, he was still looking at the toys. But in the mirror, he was watching me. Eyes unblinking. Skin too smooth. Expression unreadable. I walked away fast, hands shaking on the mop handle. 15 minutes later, I caught him again. This time near the security monitors in the back. He wasn't watching the screens. He was standing in the dark, just outside the monitor's glow, staring at the wall. Not doing anything, just being. I kept my distance and texted Kyle. You see the new guy? No reply. A minute later, I heard movement behind the break room door. I opened it slowly, expecting Kyle inside. Empty. But the vending machine was humming loudly, louder than usual. And on the little reflective strip at the bottom of the machine, I saw 2 silhouettes, mine and his, standing beside me. But the room was empty. When I turned around, no one was there. I left the break room, heart hammering, and walked the outer perimeter of the store. The manager, Ronald, was gone again. Nowhere in sight. I checked the front entrance. Still locked. No sign of any car outside. I returned to the camera room, pulled up the internal feeds. I scanned through each aisle. And there, in aisle 5, he was again, standing behind Kyle, unmoving, hands folded behind his back, watching. I switched to the next camera. He was in aisle 10 now, alone. No delay, no transition, just there, watching nothing, watching everything. I shut the monitor down. When I left my shift that morning, I passed by the manager's office. Door cracked open, Inside, the lights were off. But sitting in the chair, faint, only visible for a moment, was someone wearing a name tag, just like his. Except this one said, Mason, night manager. She was in the paper goods aisle, between the napkins and the bulk toilet paper packs. I saw her from the corner of my eye, small figure, maybe 8 or 9 years old, bright pink hoodie with white drawstrings, face obscured by the hood's shadow. I froze. No one's child should be in the store at this hour. The front doors were locked, no customers, no sound except the distant hum of refrigeration units. "Hey," I called, stepping cautiously toward her. "Are you lost?" She didn't answer, just reached out and picked up a pack of napkins like it mattered, like she was shopping. Then she turned to me and smiled. Not the smile of a scared kid, not one of relief. It was too calm, like she'd been waiting. "You always forget this part," she said, voice flat, eyes still shadowed beneath the hood. "What?" I asked, my throat dry. She let the napkins fall. They hit the tile with a soft crinkle. She stepped forward and stopped just a few feet away. "I told you not to answer when they call your name," she whispered. My mouth went cold. "What are you talking about?" "You never remember," she said. "Not until it's too late." Her hoodie had a patch stitched over the heart, a faded cartoon dog I recognized. Not because it was familiar in a general way, but specifically. It was from a box of old clothes we donated after my brother died. The exact hoodie belonged to my niece. I hadn't seen it in 10 years. I took a step back. She took a step forward. "You left her," she said. "You left her in the car." I shook my head. That's not what happened." But the lights overhead flickered. The tiles beneath us shimmered faintly, like water. The girl's face was more visible now. Pale skin, faint freckles, dark eyes too steady for her age. Her voice was low, but clear. "Where did you go, Mason?" I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. She tilted her head. "She called for you. She said your name, and you didn't answer." I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. "She's still calling," the girl whispered. Then she turned and walked straight into the shelf. Not around it, into it. The metal groaned softly as if stretching. The packages of paper towels wavered, then stilled. I blinked. She was gone. I ran to the end of the aisle, looked both ways. Nothing. I checked the monitors, rewound the feed. No child, no pink hoodie. No footage of that aisle between 2:03 and 2:06 a.m., just static. The next night, I found a drawing pinned to the back of the manager's clipboard. Crayon on receipt paper, a little girl in a hoodie, standing next to a car. And next to the car, a man with a mop in his hand, walking away. In the corner of the drawing was a single line, scrawled in red. "Why didn't you answer me?" The slope near the stockroom hallway is barely noticeable. Just a gentle incline, maybe 2 or 3 degrees, where the linoleum shifts upward toward the receiving bay. I've mopped it hundreds of times without ever thinking about it. But last night, I saw something that shouldn't be possible. It was a cart, one of the big metal ones we use for heavy merchandise. Empty, stationary, positioned at the very bottom of that ramp. I saw it out of the corner of my eye while heading back from trash disposal, just sitting there, and then it moved. Not down the slope. Up, slow, steady, effortless. No sound but the soft creak of its wheels gliding over the tile. No one behind it. No motor. No push. I stood frozen, watching it roll uphill like it was being pulled. It passed me without stopping. The air grew colder as it moved by, brushing past my arm like a chill draft from an open freezer. I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck. I followed it. Couldn't help it. The cart continued its silent journey up the hallway, past the break room, toward the end of the corridor where the walls narrow and the overhead lights dim. That stretch always felt older, less renovated, like the store's bones were showing. The cart stopped just before the last storage door. It didn't hit anything. It simply halted. Then one of its wheels turned slightly, angling the entire cart toward me. Not a full rotation, just enough to feel deliberate. I stepped back. The hallway light above me flickered and I caught a reflection in the polished floor. A second cart. Behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Only the shadows from the ceiling fixtures and the faint echo of my own breath. I turned back. Now the original cart was gone. No sound, no motion, just gone. I checked the nearby security monitor, the hallway feed, rewound it. No cart, no movement, just me, standing alone, staring at an empty corridor. I returned to the floor in a daze, pushing my mop in long, uncertain strokes. But the store was different now. The layout had changed, subtly. The snack aisle curved slightly to the left, where it used to be straight. The freezer cases hummed louder, vibrating the floor under my boots. The paint on the far wall looked darker, like it had been freshly coated, except I knew it hadn't. Even the carts in the vestibule seemed rearranged. Their nests tangled, overlapping in a way that suggested they'd been dragged into place rather than pushed. I passed one with a broken handle. On the metal, someone had scratched a word. Listen. Later, during my final round, I passed the slope again. Another cart was there. Different this time, smaller, older, already halfway up the incline. I didn't see it move. It was just farther along than before. I stood watching it for nearly 10 minutes. It didn't budge, but the hallway got colder. The lights dimmed again, and in the silence, I swear, I heard wheels turning behind the walls. It hit me the moment I opened the door to the back stockroom. A wall of scent, dirt, rich, wet, freshly disturbed earth, like someone had just turned over soil with a shovel. Not dusty, not dry, moist. And beneath it, cutting through it like a sharp edge, bleach, thick, acrid, the kind that clings to your nose hairs and lingers in your throat long after you've left the room. The combination made me stop cold. It was unnatural. No one stored bleach back here, and there was no reason for dirt to be in this part of the store. The nearest garden supplies section was 3 aisles away, and I hadn't seen anyone moving pallets recently. Not even Kyle. I stepped inside. The lights were dimmer than usual, flickering. One of them buzzed like it was trying to whisper something but couldn't form the words. The smell only got stronger. I followed it past the shelves of overstock, toward a row of unused end caps pushed against the wall. Everything was coated in a fine layer of dust, except for the floor. The tile ahead was clean, too clean, bleach wiped, almost sterile. A perfect square, maybe 4 feet by 4, surrounded by untouched grime. Like someone had washed just that patch, recently. In the middle of it was a single black trash bag, tied tight, bulging at the sides. I didn't move for a long time, just stared. The smell radiated from that spot, earth and bleach mixing in a nauseating perfume. It made my stomach turn. Eventually, I reached for the bag. The plastic was damp, cold. Something shifted inside when I touched it. Not liquid, not heavy, just wrong. I didn't open it. Couldn't. I backed away, heartbeat in my ears, breath shallow. As I turned, something caught my eye. Scratches in the tile. Faint, but deliberate. 4 parallel lines as if something or someone had been dragged across the floor. The marks led from the back wall toward the bag. I followed them back and noticed something else. A single gardening glove, small, pink, resting behind one of the end caps. I picked it up. The fabric was soaked, not with water, something sticky, metallic. I dropped it and stumbled back. Then I heard the sound, a low shuffling, from inside the wall. At first I thought it was the pipes, but it was too irregular, too heavy, like something crawling along the space between drywall. The light above me buzzed louder, then popped. Glass rained softly onto the floor, and in the darkness that followed, I heard a voice, raspy, close, breathing through bleach and soil. You buried it, but it remembers. I didn't answer. I left the glove, the bag, the scent behind me, but the smell followed, all the way to the front of the store. It clung to my uniform like a secret trying to speak. It was between aisle 14 and aisle 16. I know that sounds impossible, but that's where I found it. Aisle 15 had never existed, not in this store. We skipped that number, like some hotels skip the 13th floor. Superstition, corporate directive. Whatever the reason, I'd walked that section 100 times. There was never a gap, never a sign, just a seamless transition from 14 to 16. But last night, as I turned the corner near the back freezers, there it was, aisle 15, clean, well lit, perfectly aligned between the others as if it had always been there, but it hadn't. The signage was new. Too new. The plastic was glossy, untouched by dust, the font slightly off, thinner, narrower. The letters read, Aisle 15, Seasonal, Recovered. I stood at the entrance, hesitant. The air was different here. Still, thick, like the temperature had dropped 5 degrees just in that stretch. The floor tiles looked wet, but didn't reflect, and the light, though bright, cast no shadow. I stepped inside. Shelves lined both sides, stocked with items I didn't recognize. Strange brands, obsolete packaging, things I'd never seen in inventory, never sold, never unpacked. A row of VHS tapes with no labels, bags of flour printed with expiration dates from 2004, cans without lids, yet perfectly sealed. Halfway down the aisle, I saw a display rack filled with picture frames. Each one held a photo. Not generic stock images, real photos. A man standing in front of a broken-down truck. A child holding a wilted balloon. A woman sitting in a bathtub, fully clothed, staring straight at the lens. I looked closer and saw something chilling. In the corner of each image, barely noticeable, was a small blur. Dark, humanoid. Watching, same size, same shape, same distance. Every single photo. I kept walking. The end cap display held a row of snow globes. They weren't festive. Each one contained miniature replicas of places inside this Walmart, the electronics section, the checkout lanes, the stockroom. And inside each globe, a figure, always alone, always standing still. One globe held the break room, perfectly recreated, down to the faded chair and broken vending machine. Inside stood a tiny version of me, mop in hand, head down. I dropped it. It didn't break. Instead, the liquid inside darkened, just slightly, and the figure's head tilted upward, facing me. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and turned to leave. But the entrance was gone. The aisle stretched in both directions now. Endless. Shelves shifting slightly when I looked away. No end caps, no signage, no sound, just rows and rows of products that didn't belong to any time or place I recognized. I walked fast, then ran, past a shelf filled with alarm clocks, all stuck on 3:13 a.m., past bags of chips that hissed softly when I neared, past mirrors that showed aisles behind me that didn't exist. Then suddenly, I was out, standing in front of aisle 16 again, back in reality, back in the cold hum of fluorescent lights and low radio static. I looked over my shoulder. No aisle 15, just the empty stretch of floor between 14 and 16, as if nothing had happened. But when I checked my pocket, something was inside. A snow globe, tiny, cold, and inside it the figure was still watching me. I tried to leave early. That night after the aisle, the one that shouldn't have existed, I clocked out nearly 40 minutes before the end of my shift. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about the write-up. I just needed air, space, a moment where the walls weren't whispering, but the doors wouldn't open. The front entrance, those automatic sliding doors every Walmart has, stayed shut. I stood in front of them, waving my hand, stepping forward, backward, even knocking on the glass like an idiot. Nothing. The motion sensors didn't respond. The lights above the vestibule flickered, then dimmed. I tried the side exits next. Emergency doors with the red push bars. Same result. Locked. Dead. No alarm, no resistance. Just sealed. As if I'd never had permission to leave in the first place. I radioed Kyle. No response. Just static. I switched frequencies. Still nothing. I ran to the manager's office. Empty. Clipboard gone. Lights off. The air inside thick with the faint smell of old paper and something chemical. The screen on the desk monitor was black, but faintly reflected the blinking red light of the internal alert system. I tapped the keyboard. A message blinked across the screen. Security mode, containment. Time. Initiated. 3:13. AM user, Mason Walmgyar Pod 13. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't triggered that. Had I? I backed away slowly. My own name still blinking across the screen, as if I had commanded the lockdown myself. I checked my pockets. My badge was gone. Only the snow globe remained. cold as ever, the figure inside still staring upward. I left the office and moved quickly toward the loading dock. No lights, total darkness. Even the emergency exit sign above the door had gone out. I fumbled for the light switch. Nothing. Then I heard the sound. Not loud, just the slow, deliberate clink of a shopping cart being pushed across tile. I turned, heart in my throat, and saw nothing. But the sound continued. Closer now, each rotation of the wheels louder than the last, echoing from no specific direction, as if the entire building were replaying a memory that didn't belong to me. I ducked into the employee hallway and locked myself inside the supply closet. Stood there, in the dark, gripping a flashlight that wouldn't turn on, listening. There were footsteps now, but not human. Too steady, too heavy, like something dragging itself with mechanical intention. And beneath that, breathing, long, measured, like something pacing just outside the door. I waited, counted heartbeats. Eventually, the sound faded. When I stepped out, the hallway was empty again, but the store's intercom crackled to life. One word, my name. Not spoken with curiosity, spoken with finality. Mason. I looked up at the ceiling tiles. One of them was missing. And above it, I swear, I saw fingers pulling back slowly into the dark. It started with the lights. A subtle flicker at first, just enough to catch in the corner of my eye while I was wiping down the checkout counters. The store was still locked, no sign of Kyle, no sound beyond my own breath. Then they blinked again, longer this time. And when they came back on, the world felt slightly paused. The fan in the ceiling had stopped spinning mid-rotation. A paper receipt hung in the air behind the customer service desk, frozen, mid-fall, like someone had taken a photo of it in motion. I stood still, afraid to breathe. The lights flickered once more, and everything resumed. The fan spun again. The receipt hit the ground, but something was off. I looked up at the clock above register 3. It still read 3:13 a.m. I checked my watch. 3:13. I pulled out my phone. Dead. No time, no signal, just a black screen. I walked slowly toward the main aisle. As I did, the lights overhead continued their erratic stutter. Not like a power surge, more like the store was blinking, testing how long it could close its eyes before I noticed. Every time the lights went out, the silence deepened. And every time they came back on, the layout had shifted, slightly. End caps moved. Products faced different directions. Shelves curved in ways they hadn't before. I passed aisle 6. In one flicker, it was stocked with kitchenware. In the next, it was completely empty. In the third, it was filled with mirrors, hundreds of them, all reflecting back different versions of the aisle. One showed me walking toward it, even though I was standing still. Another showed nothing but static. The last one, was dark, not black, dark. I stepped away, heart pounding, and made my way to the electronics section. The wall of TVs should have been off, corporate policy after 2 a.m. But every screen was glowing, not with commercials, with footage, live footage. From inside the store, every aisle, every corner, all of them showing the same moment, me, frozen, standing in front of the TV wall. But I wasn't moving in the footage. I was still, breathless. And then, one by one, the screens began to delay. Half a second, then a full second, then longer, until the image of me was minutes behind, a version of me trapped in time. I turned away and sprinted back toward the front, but everything slowed. My footsteps dulled, the air thickened, and suddenly, the lights went out completely. Total blackness, no hum, no static, no motion. I stood in that absolute silence for what felt like hours. When the lights finally blinked back on, I was standing at register 7, where I hadn't been before. And in my hand was a receipt, dated 1 year into the future, with only 2 items listed: snow globe, 1, exit, void. The first whisper came at 3:29 a.m. It was soft, barely audible over the low hum of the refrigeration units. I was crouched in the pet supplies aisle, hiding between shelves of cat litter and dog biscuits, trying to breathe without making sound. The intercom system clicked once, then again, and then beneath the static, a voice. "Can you hear me now, Mason?" I stood up too fast, knocking over a display of fish food. The voice continued, still low, distorted, like it was being funneled through 10 layers of dust and distance. "You're the only one left." I scanned the ceiling, tracking the speakers. The red recording light above the intercom wasn't blinking. No one had pressed the mic. There was no announcement in progress, just a direct transmission. To me. I walked fast, hugging the walls, passing darkened aisles that no longer made sense. The store was shifting again, endlessly reconfiguring itself like a maze that didn't want to be solved. The PA clicked again. "You shouldn't have gone in the mirror aisle." I froze. I hadn't told anyone about that. Not Kyle. Not even myself. Not out loud. My legs moved on instinct, carrying me toward the pharmacy. It felt like a safe zone, though I knew better. I passed the cold medicine, the toothbrushes, the hair dye. The speakers crackled above. "Do you remember her voice yet?" I shut my eyes. No, not again. But the voice kept coming, closer now, layered over itself. Multiple voices, male, female, young, old, all whispering the same question. "Where were you, Mason?" I slammed open the cabinet behind the counter and turned on the emergency radio. Nothing. Dead air, no static, no tone. Just silence. I ran to the back, past the stockroom, past the cleaning closet. The entire hallway pulsed with sound. Every speaker in the building now active, humming at once. Then, all at once, silence. And a voice I hadn't heard in years. Small, fragile. "Uncle Mason?" I dropped the radio. That voice. It was her. My niece. The last thing I heard before the car door shut. Before the fire. Before the silence. I gripped the edge of the wall, trying to stay upright. The lights dimmed again, flickering in rhythm with my heartbeat. And the voice returned, not whispering now, but inside the speakers, the walls, the tile. "I called for you. Why didn't you answer?" I ran. Didn't know where. Didn't care. Just ran until I collapsed in the garden section. Dirt spilling from open bags, a smell that reminded me of fresh graves and childhood. Above me, the speaker buzzed once more. A final whisper, dry and brittle. "You're inside now." And for a moment, I didn't know if it meant the store or me. The memory hit me while I was cleaning the soda spill in aisle 2. I didn't even notice it coming. No trigger, no flash. Just the sharp scent of syrup and the way the red liquid spread across the floor like blood. I dropped to my knees to mop it up, and suddenly I wasn't in the store anymore. I was outside. Nighttime. Back seat of a car. Rain on the windows. My niece in the front seat, asleep. Me stepping out to grab something I'd forgotten, just for a second. Just to grab it. I snapped back. The mop was in my hand. The floor was clean. But my heart wouldn't stop pounding and my hands were shaking like I'd been outside in the cold for hours. I looked up and saw him again. The manager, Ronald, standing at the end of the aisle. No clipboard, no smile, just watching. He didn't speak. He never does. But I felt it. Felt him in my thoughts, crawling through them like fingers dragging through damp soil. He tilted his head, just slightly, as if to say, "Now you remember." I stood up slowly, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't back away. I walked toward him. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the floor was trying to hold me in place. But I kept going. When I reached the middle of the aisle, he vanished. Not around the corner, not into the back, just gone. But the temperature dropped instantly. The lights above me began to buzz, then hum, then whine, like metal under pressure. And the shelves began to tremble. Not violently, just enough to suggest breath. I turned and ran to the surveillance room. I had to see. Had to know if it was just in my head. I pulled up the live feed and cued the recording from 2 nights earlier, the moment I'd seen the snow globe version of myself. I paused it, looked into the face of that tiny figure, and noticed something new. Behind it, in the globe's miniature reflection, was a second figure, standing in the doorway of the break room, watching. I checked the hallway cam from that night, frame by frame. At 3:13:04 a.m., the door to the break room opened by itself. At 3:13:07 a.m., a figure entered. No ID badge, no name tag, just the uniform. And the eyes. His eyes. The same ones I'd seen in the convex mirrors. Black, shallow, patient. He turned toward the camera and smiled. Then the screen glitched, and for 5 full seconds the face staring back was mine. My exact face. Same eyes, same uniform, same expression. The feed resumed normally after that, but the damage was done. He knew now. He'd been waiting for me to remember. Not just the store, not just the voice, but what I'd done, what I left behind, what I walked away from. And now that I remembered, he didn't have to hide anymore. I found the photo in Register 7. It was early, maybe 2:45 a.m. The store was quiet again, unnaturally still after another night of distorted aisles and whispering speakers. I needed something to ground me, anything. So I returned to routine, counting drawers, checking till locks, wiping down counters. That's when I noticed the drawer on Register 7 wasn't fully closed. It sat slightly ajar, just wide enough to see the edge of something white sticking out between the receipt paper and the spare roll of change sleeves. I pulled it free. A photograph, old, faded, edges curled like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. The kind of photo you don't carry anymore, film printed, matte, with the faint scent of dust and plastic. It was me, 7 years old, standing in front of a convenience store, holding a grape soda and smiling. Next to me, my brother Miles. Behind us, a rust-red sedan, and in the far corner of the frame, her, my niece, sitting in the back seat, window half down, looking right at the camera, looking worried. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in thick black marker, were 3 words: "You were there." I stared at it for so long I lost track of time. I don't remember placing that photo in my pocket. I don't remember walking away from the register, but I remember the feeling in my stomach, like I was being watched from the inside. Something inside the building had put that photo there. Something wanted me to find it. I went to the break room to breathe, to think, to remind myself that I still had a mind left to untangle. But the moment I entered, the vending machine lights flickered. Then the speaker above the microwave clicked on. A soft voice. Not hers. His. Check the drawer again. I ran back to Register 7. Opened the drawer. The photo was gone. In its place, a receipt, stamped with today's date. No purchases. Just a printed message. You remember now. I crumpled it and backed away. And then, I noticed something else. The cash screen. It was active, glowing faint blue. It shouldn't have been. No power was routed to the registers after midnight. But there it was, alive. And it was running a program I'd never seen before. Just a single line of text. Transaction complete. Balance transferred. No amount. No customer ID. Just those words. I reached to shut it down, but the screen blinked again, flashing an image for less than a second. A still frame. A photo. The same one I'd held. Only now, I wasn't in it. Just Miles. And the girl in the back seat. The exit stopped responding on the 3rd night in a row. Not just the automatic doors, everything. Emergency exits, fire doors, even the loading dock shutter. All sealed. All dead. The keypad by the back hall no longer beeped. The green light above the break room door never turned on. It was official now. I wasn't stuck. I was being kept. Around 2 a.m., I found Kyle's phone vibrating behind the customer service desk. His shift had started, but he hadn't shown up. I checked the lock screen. One new message, from a number I didn't recognize. He knows you're trying to leave. I didn't open it. I left the phone where it was. Instead, I walked the aisles. All of them. Looking for proof that something was still normal. But the further I walked, the more I saw it, the way the shelves leaned slightly inward. How the fluorescent lights flickered in sync with my breathing. How every product label seemed to face me no matter where I stood. At the back of aisle 4, I saw something new. A black chair, just sitting there, perfectly centered between the paper towel racks. On the seat, my employee badge. I hadn't worn it in days. I picked it up. It was cold, heavier than it should have been. I flipped it over. A note was taped to the back, written in block letters. Mason, full-time, non-transferable. I dropped it and turned to walk away, but the aisle had changed. It no longer led back to the main walkway. It curved, subtly, pulling me deeper into the building's core. The air got warmer the farther I walked, the shelves taller, the floor softer like linoleum laid over something that moved beneath it. I emerged into a section I didn't recognize. Wide, empty. A pale light above, pulsing softly like breath. In the center, a desk. Atop it, a sign that read, "Welcome to your station." Behind the desk, a single locker. Open. Inside, the same hoodie the girl wore, the pink one, neatly folded. Next to it, a name tag. Mason, night manager. My legs gave out. I dropped to my knees, chest tight, ears ringing. This place wasn't haunted. It wasn't cursed. It was alive, and it was grooming me, folding me into itself, like cartilage growing around a wound, like a scar forming where there was once escape. The walls around the desk shifted slightly inward, not violently, not cruelly, lovingly, as if making room. The intercom clicked on again. A soft, kind voice, my own voice, whispered, "We're so glad you stayed." It started with a draft. I was walking through the cleaning aisle, dragging my mop behind me, trying not to think about the desk, the locker, or the badge with my name already printed. That's when I felt it. Cool air drifting from above. Not from the vents, from the ceiling tiles themselves. I looked up. Most were standard. White, porous, speckled with age and grime. But one, directly above the center of the aisle, was different. Slightly darker, clean, new, and on it, written in thick, black ink, Miles, my brother's name. I stood frozen beneath it, unsure if I was hallucinating or finally understanding something I wasn't meant to. I moved backward slowly, scanning the other tiles. There was another one, 2 panels down. Charlotte, my niece. I dropped the mop and began walking the aisles, neck craned toward the ceiling. Every few feet, another name appeared. Always a single tile, always a single name. Some were faded, others looked fresh. Tommy, Inez, Kay Ramirez, Lori, Temp. Then I turned a corner into the frozen food section. There, every tile was marked. Dozens of names. A silent grid of people the store had kept. Some were scratched out. Some were rewritten in red. One tile bore only a date, 3/13, void. The further I walked, the closer the names became to me. Familiar ones, coworkers, old managers, even customers I vaguely remembered from years ago, faces that had lingered too long at checkout, people who came in once and never again. The last aisle I checked was locked. Aisle 0, not listed on the directory, not visible unless you already knew where to look. The door had no handle, but I knew what would be behind it. Still, I knocked. One soft tap. And somewhere deep behind the wall, something knocked back 3 times. Then silence. Above me, the ceiling creaked. I stepped back, looked up, and saw the newest tile, still wet, still glistening, and written in careful, neat letters, Mason, staying. I decided to leave, not sneak out, not hope the doors would magically unlock. I was done playing by the store's rules. I waited until 4:03 a.m., long past the last time the intercom had spoken, long after the lights had gone steady again. I picked up my keys, my jacket, and I walked straight to the emergency exit near the garden center. It didn't budge. Of course it didn't, so I didn't stop there. I moved aisle by aisle, door by door. I slammed on glass, tried the loading dock shutter, even pried open the ceiling vent with a screwdriver I'd stashed weeks ago. No exit, but I kept trying. Eventually, I reached the fire escape behind aisle 11, a narrow hallway most employees didn't even realize was there. It was older, lined with faded instructional posters and forgotten carts. At the end, a red door, the kind meant for evacuations only. I grabbed the handle. It turned. The door creaked open into complete darkness. No sound, no air, no temperature at all. Just absence. I stepped through, and suddenly, I was in aisle 7. Exactly where I'd started, exactly where I always start. Mop in hand, cart beside me, radio clipped to my belt, the soda spill already on the floor. The clock above the freezer case blinked. 3:13. I backed away slowly, moved toward the break room. Tried the bathroom door instead. Opened it. Inside was the garden center, fully stocked, lights humming. A single shopping cart facing the wrong direction. I turned and opened the janitor's closet, the receiving bay. Same air, same flickering light, same black trash bag. I closed it, opened it again. Now it was the toy aisle. Each door, each threshold, randomized, rearranged. A recursive maze folding in on itself. No pattern, no exit, only return. Even the security monitors betrayed me. Each time I pulled up a camera feed, it showed me in the aisle I was currently in, watching myself from above, in real time. No delay, no blind spots. Every angle, every movement, all observed, tracked, owned. I opened the snow globe again, the one I'd hidden in my locker. Now it showed a new scene. Not the break room, not the electronics section, but my apartment. Empty, lights off, a single chair facing the door, waiting. I tried to scream, but the sound fell flat, swallowed by tile and shelf and ceiling. Then, the intercom clicked on again. Not with a whisper, with a single tone. Clear, final. Mason, please return to your station. It no longer whispers. It no longer hides in the vents or masks itself through static, or borrows the voice of a child I failed to protect. Now it speaks plainly, and it uses my name like it owns it. Mason. Not shouted, not asked, declared. Sometimes through the intercom, sometimes through the subtle whir of refrigeration fans, sometimes just written in frost on the glass of the freezer doors. The store no longer rearranges itself for me. It has settled, solidified, accepted me, and in some sick way, I think I've accepted it too. I stopped trying the doors 3 nights ago. There's nothing out there for me anymore. No apartment, no outside. Just this, white tile, flickering lights, endless aisles that curve in on themselves like loops in my own memory. I clean. I stock. I respond to messages I never see delivered. Kyle doesn't show up anymore. I haven't seen him since the text. The manager's office remains locked, but the badge with my name still hangs on the chair. I don't touch it. I don't need to, because I know who I am now. I know what I am. When you hear your name spoken aloud in a place like this, not called out, but named, you don't ignore it. You become it. There's a mirror in the cosmetics aisle I sometimes stand in front of. Not to look at myself, but to see if I'm still visible. Lately, my reflection's been fading. Only partially. Like I'm being layered over by someone else. Or something else. The smile it gives me is too still. The eyes too wide. Sometimes the reflection mouths something I don't remember thinking. But I never hear the words. Not anymore. Because this place doesn't speak in language now. It speaks in presence. And I feel it. All the time. In the lights, in the tiles, in the quiet click of a register drawer that opens even when I'm alone. In the photo that always finds its way back to the bottom of the cart, no matter how many times I throw it out. I asked once, out loud, if I'd ever leave. The ceiling tiles didn't answer, but one of them shifted slightly. And when I looked up, a new name was written there. Clear, bold, Mason, inventory. And beneath it, scratched in uneven lettering, filled. So if you ever find yourself in this store after hours, and you hear your name, not whispered, not shouted, stated, don't answer. Because once the store knows you, it never forgets.